Welcome to another episode of the Basketball and Brew podcast, produced by Jude McLaren, and I'm your host, Dan Miller. We'd like to start out tonight by thanking our sponsors, both right here in beautiful San Marcos, starting with Pie Society, great New York-style pizza using the best ingredients and makes everything fresh and in-house. Zellick's Ice House is a must-stop in San Marcos with excellent drinks, happy hour, great patio, and fun vibes. Tonight, in the third episode of Basketball and Brew, we have a special guest from LSU, Coach Casey Long. Before being named assistant coach at LSU, Coach Long was at Murray State for 5 seasons and part of one of the greatest periods in Murray State program history, which includes 121 wins, 4 Ohio Valley Conference regular season championship, 3 tournament championships, and helped coach some of the great players that came out of Murray State, including KJ Williams and Ja Morant. Coach Casey, thank you for coming on and welcome to the podcast.
Oh man, thank you for having me. That bio sounds great, man. I got some lucky players, man. Wow.
Well, lucky players and great coaching. I know from following and watching you and knowing you a little bit, you guys with Coach McMahon have done a great job at Murray State, and everyone's excited to see what you'll do at LSU. And flowing right into that, Coach, you guys are in transition time, not quite 2 months at LSU. Can you tell everybody how are things going at LSU so far?
A lot calmer than it did when we first started. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
It's been cool. It's a dope experience because very few times you get an opportunity to coach at this level, and when you do, you're expected to be all roses. And it wasn't like that coming in. Obviously, we had some players choose to do some different things, and we were supportive of everybody to do what's better for them. But ultimately, we had to fill a roster out, and so doing that, getting to know the area, getting to know the dynamics around the program, getting to know the academic situation, getting to know everything that involves running a successful program. It was hard to do it when you have a blank slate. But the fortunate thing is it also gives you an opportunity, if you look at it that way, to build the roster the way you want to, and also build a culture that you want to have there. And I'll speak a lot about that tonight. But we were fortunate, and now we're starting to get a little bit calmer and actually get prepared to implement a lot of the things we want to do. So it's been great. It's been a great start. I'm looking forward to building on it and getting the progression going in the right way.
Absolutely, Coach. And now you have a really good class coming in. You're still probably finalizing that, but a lot of hype. And like you and I were talking earlier, now you have to put it all together. But what does having the guys that transferred from Murray State that know that culture, that know how coach coaches, what does that do, and how will you utilize that?
It's important to build a roster with knowns and unknowns, because ultimately you're trying to have the most successful team. In order to have a successful team, you got to have a successful culture. The best people to implement that culture are people that you know. So that was a major piece of it. We're very appreciative and thankful for all the people who chose to come on the journey with us here at LSU from the player standpoint. But ultimately, the culture is going to define everything. So having people that can implement that, know us, know our staff, get to know our new staff, how we bridge it all together as one group, and ultimately have a chip on your shoulder to prove something. Understand that year one doesn't have to be a rebuild year. It's not about that. And getting guys with that chip on their shoulder and wanting to do great things was very important and vital to us. And that's the first beginning of how you start a good program. We got to be able to establish our culture in the right way and having the right pieces to do it.
Right. And, Coach, your culture at Murray State was a really one known for their defense, known for their toughness, guys playing with a chip on the shoulder. I really enjoy watching it, diving into synergy these last couple of days. Staying with LSU, though, the transition, a lot of times in the news and the media, it's talked about the head coach when they take the job. And when your head coach leaves for a job like LSU, the assistant coaches are still there, and they're transitioning and finding out, are they going to go? Are they going to stay? Are they going to become the head coach there? Whatever it is. So can you just take us through that process a little bit personally, and then also how it is talking to the team in that transition?
Well, it's something that you can never prepare for, because the way our process went was, we were fortunate to be a part of a team that made it to the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament. And we were excited. And we lost to a really good St. Peter's team that obviously went on to have tremendous success this year. We We get back, we're on the bus going back. Uh, and you never know. I mean, for us, we were going into getting ready to prepare for the next season, how we can make
Hmm.
Murray State better again. And so we get back Monday. The news breaks of Coach having an opportunity to coach at LSU. We get down there pretty soon after, and now you're caught in between because you have these relationships and the families that you've recruited to Murray State, and you didn't have the
Right.
opportunity necessarily to talk to each one of them individually. When the news were going on, so forth and so on, the rumors. So having a chance to sit down and talk to them, obviously we were very appreciative because our players were very supportive of it. Having an opportunity to go down to LSU to try to build something, it was a process that you never think about. But the only thing you got to keep in the back of your head is, you got to treat people the right way, treat people with respect, treat them with something that you would want to know from them, and ultimately, that's going to lead to whatever decisions you make and however you carry yourself. So we tried to make sure we was very respectful of the process, but it's definitely not something you can prepare for because you have the emotional high of the
Right.
tournament, of being excited to advance. You have the lowest of the low of losing in a tournament.
Yep.
And then 3 days later, you have an opportunity to coach at one of the most prestigious universities in America. And this is all within a week. And
Right.
so,
Right.
it was definitely an interesting transition, a welcome transition, but also a very difficult transition because, for us, we had a lot of success at Murray State and we love the fans. We love the people around there. We
It's a great
built family.
basketball community. Yep.
It is. It's an unbelievable basketball
Yep.
community. You build relationships because they care about it.
Yes.
And, when you transition out of it and you didn't really get to say all the goodbyes that you necessarily wanted to say, you didn't get to really have the conversation that you want to have, it was difficult. But, we're very appreciative because people were very happy for us, and ultimately gave us opportunity to try to build something similar to what we had at Murray State here at LSU.
Right. And coach, so when you get to LSU and you have that meeting in the office and you're with coach and you have players that are leaving and you look up at that dry erase board or whatever you guys have fancy probably at LSU and you look at your roster and you see no players. What is that meeting like and how do you build a roster? Because you guys are building a great one, but how would take us through that?
Um, First and foremost, Coach McMahon, he's one of the best coaches I've ever seen,
It's
and
great.
he's always going to preach, you know, players first.
Mm,
So when he had his meeting and he spoke to everyone, and everyone had to make an individual decision, we didn't want to make it a negative thing. It's a positive thing. You have to
mm,
look at it from different points of view. And I try to do is try to be realistic about the process. If I'm a player and I went to play for another coach at a university that I wanted to play at, and a new coach transitions in, you know, the opportunity to transfer and look at all your options is realistic. It's not a negative, it's a positive
yep,
because it's like speed dating at that point. You don't have a lot of time to build that relationship. You're trying to, but you don't have a lot of time. But you want to have all the options on the table to see what's best for you. And so when we got there, that was one of the things that we discussed with the players, and ultimately they made some decisions. Now, we were fortunate, for all the players who were there, we had a chance to get to know them, and they had a chance to get to
hmm,
know us. And we had some players come back that we're really appreciative of, and we had some players decide to move on. But it's not a
hmm,
negative. I mean, I try to be, put yourself in the player's position that I hope everyone would do and put yourself in their shoes. Nobody wants anyone to leave,
right,
but you also want them to be happy. They get
yep,
4 to 5 years to play collegiate basketball. After that, they have to move on with their life, whether it's professional level or in a different field. That's
right,
their opportunity to do so. And so it's my job as a coach to be respectful of not only the players, but of their families to do what's best for them.
right,
We present the options. We wanted everyone to come back if we could. If we couldn't get them back, that's okay as long as they end up in a great situation. And a lot of the players behind the scenes, we were talking to them every day, uh, trying to make sure they did the best things for them. So ultimately, it was different, because like you say, you're going on a whiteboard and you're trying to figure out how to connect the dots. Well, you can't
hmm,
connect the dots without knowing what your base is.
right,
And so for us, establishing a foundation of what we want and what we want a player and what we want to be a part of our culture, and assembling a staff that embodied that, ultimately laid the foundation to get the players that we have now, and also wish the players who decided to move on the best for their careers to hopefully get themselves to the next level at whatever institution they decide to join.
Right. And I love what you said about being player first, coach. And it is about their experience, and whether they stay with you or move on, your staff wants them to be happy. Coach, it's a small world sometimes connecting the dot, but when I was at Laterno University and took over, we were trying to change the culture there. And to do so, we needed a point guard from Murray State, Jeff Martin Jr. So, and he came in and was able to play for 2 years, changed our culture with his leadership, some of it which he learned at Murray State from that great basketball program and atmosphere. So, yeah, it's a small world sometimes, but I know exactly what you mean about culture changing players, and I know the culture that you want to build at LSU.
No, I mean, the thing is, and Jeff is a good example. He's moved on. He's coaching now, but
Yeah.
he had an opportunity to put together the TBT team at
Mm-hmm.
Murray State last year to participate in the TBT tournament. Well, you only can do that if you have a foundation of great players. The only way you can have a foundation of great players, you have to have a foundation of great coaches and communities that want to participate in that program. And credit to him, it was easy to pull out of the pool to get the players that you needed to play in it because the talent level was so high at any level. NBA, overseas, it didn't really
Right.
matter. And so that the culture at Murray and the environment at Murray is second to none. And they helped lay the foundation to give us the opportunity to be here because they allowed us to coach the way we want to coach and bring in the players that we needed to be successful and ultimately get them graduated, but also make them better men. And that allowed us to be ultimately in the position that we are now. So now the culture and the community there was incredible, but it also teaches you a lot about how you want to build your program moving forward. I
Right.
always say one of the things that you got to do, you got to take something from every situation, good or bad. You have to, because you're going
Mm-hmm.
to learn positive or negative. You're going to learn something from it.
Yep.
And we were able to take so many positives that it not enabled us to get to where we are now, but also enabled us to lay a foundation that we feel is solid and that we trust because we were able to do it beforehand.
Right, right. And coach, besides your culture at Murray State, you guys won 121 games and conference titles, and just had one of the most successful teams the past 5 years. It doesn't matter what conference you're in. From a basketball standpoint, what do you think contributed to that? When I looked at synergy, I see excellent on both defense and offense, which is outstanding. Is there something that you guys hang your hat on, your calling card? It's our man-to-man defense, or is it a accumulation of many things?
I mean, first is good players. I mean,
Yeah.
I would love to tell you that some of that stuff is, man, we just coached everything and this and the other, but ultimately, the first thing we did was bring in good players. And probably second part or 1A, 1B to that is we brought in good players and great teammates.
Mm.
Those were the two core values of what we needed to establish there. Because if
Yep.
you bring those two things in, how you play and the style you play will be contagious. And then the next thing, obviously we're a team that pride ourselves on defense and toughness.
Right.
Well, to have that, you got to have tough players. And
Right.
if you got to have confident players that they may not be where the other players are with their toughness, but you have a team around them that's going to give them the tools to be successful. And then we went down to playing a style of play on offense that we play with fast. We try to shoot the ball.
Mm-hmm.
We try to play up and down. We try to play a fun style of play with a lot of ball screen, a lot of space on the court, a lot of players to
Yep.
be played. But all those things don't happen if you don't have the players in place and the players buy-in.
Right.
Part of the reason that we won 121 games, yeah, we'll like to take credit for it as coaches because the players bought in.
Right.
It's no secret. We were able to watch players have success at all different levels and all different facets of life, not just on the court, but off the court, because they bought into ultimately what we wanted to have happen. And it was our job as coaches to pour into them to make them be as successful as we possibly could and use our every waking minute and hour to make sure that we maxed out on the court because we can't ask those players to do everything for us if we're not willing to do it for them.
Right.
And so the buy-in there was tremendous. And we were able to bridge a gap there that allowed us to have success over those years, that ultimately led to championships and NCAA appearances.
Yep.
But you don't get there without good players, good teammates, and buy-in in the program.
Definitely. And that buy-in goes so far, especially when you have your best players bought in all the way. And, when your best player comes in and practices hard, the whole practice is going to be great. And you've had some really good players. What was it like, Coach, coaching Ja Morant? And how was he? When did you realize, or maybe you knew when you guys recruited him, that he was going to be Ja Morant?
I don't. That's a good question. I don't know when we knew as a collective group. I'll say this: coaching them was one of the best experiences because we had a really good team off that team.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our players who was a freshman on the team, Tevin Brown, is participating in the G League Combine event right now and played
Okay.
today. And so
Mm-hmm.
I use that as an example is he was really good, but he had a lot of teammates that he poured into to make them really successful as well. And he laid a culture and a foundation that he wanted to be accountable at all times. And he wanted
Mm-hmm.
us to hold him accountable at all times. And when he came to practice, he was going to hold his teammates accountable at all times. So you raise the level of play. You
Mm-hmm.
know, for across the board in basketball, all you want is your best players to play just like they do in a game in practice.
Right.
If they do that, it's going to be competitive practices where you're going to get some stuff out of it. Ultimately, you're going to make everything better around you. And he did that. And the game that for me, and I tell them story at a time, it wasn't a big time game or this, that, and the other. When we played a team, Jacksonville State, who was really good, coached by Ray Harper, and I think it
Mm-hmm.
was his freshman year, we lost to him by probably 20. I mean, we were getting wore out.
Mm-hmm.
And the next game, he said that he apologized after the game for his play because he didn't have a great game. And the next game,
Mm-hmm.
he said, "When we play him at home, coach, I promise I'm gonna be a lot better." And that game, it wasn't about the points, assists, the rebounds. He picked up 94 feet the whole time. Played
Mm.
39 minutes in the game, picked up 94 feet the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed me something. It showed me that he cares about winning more than any individual accolade.
Mm.
So when you surround yourself with players like that and you
Yep.
add more players to that, ultimately you're going to have success. And then, I mean, after his sophomore year, it's like watching the show. I mean, I would
Yeah.
love to say we coached a lot of that, but I mean, we put
Yeah.
him in position in some places, but some of that stuff he kind of did on his own. So
Right.
I like to say I had front row seats to one of the best shows on earth. I watched
That.
it, and you could
Yeah.
just see it stop going just like this. And now you see what it carries over to for the NBA, and hopefully he's an all NBA player by the end of this year as well.
Yeah, and I think he's definitely becoming that, no doubt. And something you said there that I love is that when your best player cares about winning, and Ja Morant cares about winning more than anything else, as a coach, you just love that, and that is contagious. And one other thing, staying with Ja Morant, coach, what was it like when he's taking over a game, and you're coaching a player that great, and that you're in your timeouts? Is it just putting him in space with a pick and roll, or do you communicate? He's your best player. Do you, as coaches, your head coach, say, Ja, what would you like? Here are two plays, pick one, or that type of thing when you have a player of that magnitude?
I'll be honest. That's where I think Coach McMahon is one of the best in America
Mm-hmm.
at, because he spends so much time with these players off the court that when he gets to those moments, they have a trust level that they can communicate about basketball. And
Mm.
it's not, hey, I'm the coach, do what I say. It's, hey, what do you see out there? Along
Yeah.
with, hey, this is what I see. What's the best option? So
Right.
for John, it was one of those things that he saw a lot of plays before it happened, and he would see the next play happen before it happened. So when
Yep.
we came to timeouts, we would give him what the game plan of what we saw out there, but you trusted him because of his basketball mind and IQ that you're going to listen back to him and say, hey, all right, what do you see? And a lot of the stuff that we did was dictated based on what we saw on film, but also what he felt comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to morph styles of play to do what fits what that team needs, ultimately, like I said, goes to credit to Coach McMahon because he's not gonna he's not one that's just gonna do what he has to do because it's his way of doing it. He's gonna do what's best for that team in that moment for that year.
Right.
And Ja allowed us to do a lot of different adjustments on ball screens because of his ability to get downhill, his ability to put pressure on the rim, his ability to play within the mid range, which whether it's a floater or a jumper, to sink the defense to ultimately give guys shots on the perimeter. Well,
Yep.
he was able to do that. So a lot of the times we had a game plan going in where we were running a lot of set plays. But ultimately, we saw the way the teams were guarding him, so we were able to twist the ball screen some and do different things to get him down here to put pressure on the rim because he's going to get to the free throw line. And
Right.
his ability to get to the free throw line changes the way defenses have to play.
Right.
And he allowed us to do some of those things and allowed us some freedom on offense to be creative because not only did you have him, we had shooters around him and we had bigs inside that can score. So we were able to put a lot of things on the court to give him weapons. But it all started with what he thought about first and what him and Coach McMahon had a conversation about during the timeouts. Ultimately carry that over to the court.
Right. Right. And adaptability of Coach McMahon, you can see that too from year to year because we have different rosters and it turns over, and you have to take the pieces you have. So now, how will that adaptability, do you think, transfer over to LSU as you're playing with, you had great players at Murray State, and I know some of them are joining your team, but obviously you're now in the SEC, and you're going to have NBA players you're playing against night in, night out, and NBA players on your team. How does anything change, or do you just do it with new players?
I think you have to be able to do a lot of homework. I think as coaches, the one thing people get lost in is, you wait till the season to prepare. You wait till your players to get there to prepare. Well, you got to start preparing now.
Mm-hmm.
We've played some SEC teams. We've been fortunate enough to play against some, which you quote unquote high major teams when we were at Murray State in the NCAA tournament. But ultimately, to do all that, you got to have a high level of preparation.
Yep.
So for us, um, our style of play won't change. Our core and our foundation will not change. Now, we might have to add wrinkles and tweaks and things like that to it, but our core stay the same. In our opinion, we're always going to feel that we have talented players that we believe in.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get them to max out their belief? That's one thing. But the key is this offseason is where all the work begins because and we have a great staff. Coach Topper, who's been in the NBA, who knows how to do player development, from Coach Hamilton, who should be a future head coach here really soon because he's coached at all levels and has success. To
Mm-hmm.
have those people on your staff, along with Coach McMahon and Coach Moore, who was at Northwestern State, who was associate head coach there, Coach Kane, who was with us at Murray State, Coach White, who was with us at Murray State, um, Coach Mitchell and Tasman, who's at LSU, who's seen
Mm-hmm.
success. Well, you surround the whole staff with success like that, with our strength coach, Coach Puckett, who came with us. What happens is you have a bunch of basketball minds that may see a lot of different things. You got to be
Mm-hmm.
selfless, coach.
Right.
You got to be able to be open to opinions because if you're doing that, you're trying to look at the growth of your program, not growth of you being correct.
Right.
And so to have that big of a staff with those basketball minds in one area, now the homework begins on how we communicate things, do things, tweak, so forth and so on. So by the time the players get to campus, we're able to implement a program that not only we're confident in, that the players feel confident in, and it's what's best for us. So we'll tweak some stuff about it, but we're not going
Mm-hmm.
to change our foundation because our
Right.
foundation works. It's just
Yes.
an opportunity to showcase it on another level.
Yeah, absolutely. And coach, in that foundation that you guys will roll out, one of the things I talked about a little bit earlier was just tempo and
Mhm.
transition and pace is a big part of your program. I know the way you run your offense, playing at a fast pace. How do you guys get your team to play so fast? You practice it, I'm sure, but can you take us through that, teaching them transition offensive basketball?
Yeah, what we do a lot of times in the summer is we do a lot of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
We like our players to be on campus during the summer. We like to bring the whole team there. So we're teaching as one, and they get the opportunity to play with each other. How you practice, how they play pickup when they play, all that goes into the pace of play. So for
Mm-hmm.
transition, we love to teach spacing.
Yep.
That's the key. You've got to
Love it.
keep the court space.
Yep.
You know, John, great point guards that we've had at Murray State, they can't do what they need to do if the court is shrunk, which means you got to recruit players to that specific offense. You got to have spacing in the corners so your kids can get shots off. And more so different than other people. Like, we can play a lot of different. I know a lot of people playing 5 out, 4 out, different style of play.
Mm-hmm.
We have a package of playing traditional somewhat because the one thing that gets lost in all these threes that everyone's shooting is you have a big that can run to the rim. He's by himself is going to put pressure on the rim by just having
Right.
his presence there, which
Yep.
shrinks the court with people having to help, which allows guys to shoot shots and open opportunities for guards to get downhill. So we like to put together a package in transition that we teach spacing. We spend a lot of time on it. And then after you teach the spacing, the next facet of it, you got to teach ball screen offense. There's motions, there's different variations, but we're a ball screen team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just come off the ball screen and make a read. You got to sit down and teach every read in that. You don't have to be great at it.
But they
To
got
be
to know
honest,
them.
you just got to know the reads.
Yep.
And then you have to work on it in repetition. So
Right.
for us, it's great to work on 1,000 things, but if you're great at one or two things and your teammate is great at one or two things and another teammate, well, your team is great at 10 things on the court. Now, how do you put that together in a system to work? And we do a lot of breakdown of teaching the ball screen and the reads and the things that people need to do our players need to do off the ball screen in order to get the best shot every time. And that's why it's enabled us to have one of the top 5 transition offenses every year we've been on the court,
Mm-hmm.
because we devote a lot of time to it. And it goes back to what I said earlier, it's buy-in. Because,
Right.
one of the things we say is, like, in practice, give or take, guys will work on 200 or 300 shots a week, a day. Everybody's working, America's working on their game.
Yeah.
You might get to a practice, you might shoot 5 shots or 8 shots in practice
Yeah.
total in a 2.5 hour span. And so what are you doing with the other parts of the game to make you a better player? If the ball's in
Right.
your hand 5%, you got to be really good at the 95%.
Yep.
You also got to be bought into the 95% because it may not show up in the stat book. And
Right.
so our transition offense has been really helped, not only having great players and teaching the space and teaching the ball screens, it goes back to the buy-in. And, I say this not to be off subject, but you have to be intentional about teaching buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that you say, hey, we're going to have a team meeting, everybody love each other and go in here. You have to be intentional of how you build your team, what
Right.
you want them to be great at. How do you build a roster to communicate? How do you build a roster to become one family? Because if you're not intentional in that early in the summertime, when you're doing your research homework, not only on other teams on your team, when adversity hit, they're not going to know how to deal with it because you don't know how they deal with it. And it's
Right.
not their fault. It's our fault for not putting in the time. And so it's a long way of saying that transition offense, it X's and O's wise, spacing, ball screen teaching, ball screen reads, putting pressure on the rim. But all that starts back in the summer, because
Mm-hmm.
if we didn't build the team, your ball screen offense ain't going to work because nobody's going to share the ball. They're going to
Right.
be out there shooting. And now your offense don't look very good. So long
Right.
way of saying that's how we teach our ball screen offense, teach our transition offense.
No, I love that, coach. And we try to do that here, at the high school level at San Marcos, and, play fast and run our lanes, whether it's running the rail, but teaching that big and finding a big who will win that foot race and get down to either the dunk zone or the post-up spot is huge when you have those bigs who are committed to running. So is there anything specifically you do with your posts or your bigs besides the 5-on-0, maybe dry runs, that you do to get them to sprint the floor?
Confidence in individual work.
Hmm.
What we try to do is be very diverse with our workout to make them feel like they're getting better, and them to see the results rather than us telling them the results.
Right.
Conditioning is also a big piece,
Mm-hmm.
because if I don't ask you to sprint the court and I don't require you to run and I don't hold you accountable to do that, I can't expect you to do that in the game when everything is going on and you're on the road. Um, but also a lot of film work. You know,
Hmm.
it's one of those things that, we like to watch the pro game. We don't hide from, we don't mask ourselves from it. We
Yep.
like to watch the pro game. We also like to learn from other collegiate players.
Mm-hmm.
So we watch a lot of film on players that's playing in college right now. But we also pull up tape from bigs that we've seen in the past at different levels that every coach has coached against that was very successful, because that film doesn't lie. So,
Right.
that's where coaches, we have to put our pride aside a little bit. And we're fortunate to have a staff that's done that. That's all they care about is the success of the program rather than individual accolades. We're able to say, like, hey, uh, I'm watching this team back in the day, and they ran a successful offense, and their big was running, and it was in the 2000s. How did they get there? What did they do? What did that big read? And we let our players study, because if you
Mm-hmm.
study from different parts, whether it's history, current, or future, what you're going to find out really quick is the players are going to just keep retaining that information, and they might not learn all of it, but the little bit they learn will go a long way. So our bigs, we challenge them all the time to be in shape, to watch a lot of film, and your
Sure.
skill development is extremely important. I've always said this. The reason that we've had fortunate players and we've done that is because they've been dedicated to the work. But we always preach that they got better every year, something different.
Yeah.
You know,
I like that.
Ja Morant averaged 12.6 rebounds, 6 assists his freshman year. It's one of the best college seasons for a freshman that everybody's any seen. His next year, he was 24 and 10. It's a 12-point jump.
Mm-hmm.
Tevin Brown, who we coached at Murray State, he's the all-time OVC leader in
Yep.
threes. He's the all-time leader in school history in threes. Well, Tevin is a great three-point shooter, but what we took pride in, he's also averaged 5 assists a game. His
Right.
ball handling got better. And
Right.
so that's just from the guard point of view. So if I'm a big and I'm running the rim, I can't be just a layup and dunk guy. That's great in year one. That's great in year two. But you want to expand your game to do something else. And if they see us as coaches pouring into them and allow them the opportunity to get better as a player, ultimately they're going to be more bought into running the rim because they're going to see more success down there and see more opportunities to score rather than just catch and finish. They'll be able to catch and make some plays. And now you've expanded their ability of learning and wanting to run the rim and wanting to do everything they can to get into the rim. So you got to be intentional about that, in my opinion, because everybody wants to impact winning. Players don't
Hmm.
come on the court to say, "How can I not be successful?" They want to be successful. It's our
Right.
job as coaches to figure out where they can have success at, where can we pour into them at and teach them at and hold them accountable to do better, but ultimately where we can see the next jump for them.
Right.
And if you want buy-in from your bigs, you got to be bought into their skill development, their success, their film work, and ultimately their conditioning to get there.
Yep. Oh, I love that, coach. I'm excited to get to practice tomorrow morning with our bigs in athletic period and get them running. Staying with that, coach, is something I'll add to that is a lot of the buzz phrase over these last few years or for a while is, a lot of coaches say they don't want to coach effort. Like, I don't want to coach effort. Personally, I don't really buy into that. Yes, we want our guys to go hard all the time. But the truth is they're not going to. So when you're building those relationships like Coach McMahon is and you are and your staff, you don't realize it, but you're coaching effort because you're building relationships. So then when you ask them, hey man, I need you to go a little bit harder, that's part of coaching effort. And I think that's kind of what you're saying about that accountability factor for your big. And I like that. That's part of, we can't as coaches just expect them to do it. We have to help them and guide them and sometimes, demand them or whatever it is, but get them to get it done and run that floor.
I mean, perspective is everything. You want to be realistic about it. A lot of coaches who've played, I mean, we like to say all the time, man, back when we played, so forth and
Yeah.
so on. But I'm also realistic. If a player has ran 3 straight miles and he's done it in about, I don't know, 18 minutes, give or take, it's pretty good. I can't ask him after you run those 3 straight miles to go lift for an hour and max out. Their body can't physically do it. It's
Right.
not realistic for them. So you got to have some feel there. Like, the players, if they're giving you their all, as a coach, you got to be able to read the room. And you got to
Right.
be able to say, like,
Mm.
man, I want this player to give max effort, but he may not have it. And that's where I say that the focus of how you build your team is important because the player may not have it because he may have a test that he stayed up all night studying for. He may
Right.
have had a family event go on that he's been talking all night. He may
Right.
have just been body just exhausted. He may have been sick. So if you go with the no excuses, just results approach, am I really caring about the player? Because if somebody would talk to me like that, or a family member, if I had a family member in that situation, I wouldn't tell them that. I wouldn't tell them, hey, man, I know you're sick, man. You just got to figure it out. No, I'm going to help them get to where they can feel better.
Right.
So our players are going through a lot. They're a student athlete, and we take that serious, and that's one of the things we're going to take serious at LSU. We take it serious. We want our players to graduate. It's important for them, for them to hang that degree on the wall so their kids have an opportunity to see that, and then
Mm.
they can do it. Not saying that the degree is the end all be all, but if it's something that you strive to do, it's got to be important to the coach. And so
Yep.
if I've been stressed over a test and it might impact my play on the court, what am I doing as a coach to mitigate that circumstance? What am I doing early in the morning to make sure they had a good day? Checking in on them. A simple text say, "Hey man, good luck on your test." A simple text after and say, "Hey man, great job on that test."
Mm.
We're trying to manage emotions
Yep.
from kids who are 18 to 22 and have a lot of different circumstances going on around them. So yeah,
Right.
I 100% agree. You effort is coach, but it's not just on the court. It's in all facets of life.
Yep.
And that's where as coaches, we can make the greatest impact on them because they're dealing with a lot.
Yep.
They,
Yep.
they, they have family, they have emotion, they have a heart. So if something's going on with them, that might impact them in another facet of their life. So if you
Right.
want max effort from the court, you got to be able to know that player and know what's going on in order to not only get them to perform the best in practice, but also get to perform the best in life. And that's how you get the
Yes.
best out of your players.
Exactly. I love that, coach. And that goes with that coach who once said, I'll tell you how my team is 20 years from now, with what kind of men they become. And these life lessons that we're doing and working with them will help them become those men we want to seek. And we can do that while we win games also. Coach, staying with that adaptability, one thing you said, I love what you said about read the room. When we're planning practices, you come up with this beautiful practice plan and here 2 hours, this thing's going to be exactly like that. And I think when I was younger, I would stay true to it, every drill, I got to get it in. And now what I learn is, that's a template. We're going to get through most of this, but we're going to read the room a little bit. And maybe we need to work a little bit harder on this, a little bit less on this. Maybe we reward them and cut it out early and just finish with a fun drill at the end, whatever it is. And I think that is something I noticed in the Murray State program. Just you guys are very adaptive in games when I watch your conference tournament games. And is that something, that is part of your program?
Absolutely. The adaptability is everything. Because what you're going to find is every year we keep our practice. So I could tell you from day one of our workouts to the last day of practice, everything we did. But I can also tell you within that game plan and in that strategic managing that it changes.
Yep.
Because guess what? Your best player might be sick that day. You can't have the same practice. Your team might be on a roll and they might be in a routine that works for them. And you might not need to change to do X, Y, Z. You have to be able to adapt because players are human and coaches are human. And
Right.
you have to trust your eyes and what you see. So if your team is gassed, you have to be able to adjust. If you don't feel your team is maxing out, you got to be able to ramp it up. It's a double-edged sword. You got to be able to do both. But also in a game, you might go in a game plan because there's great coaches at every school. Every school has great coaches or they wouldn't be there.
Right.
So when they're there, they have a game plan in which they're trying to do certain things. If a team is a 90% man and they switch zone and you didn't prepare for that, and you're just saying, hey, man, we're just going to wing it, you're not giving your team the best chance to win. But you got to be able to adjust. And you can't look at adjustments as a negative. You can't look at it as a team adjust their style of play to you as a negative because they can't guard this, that, and the other. No, they're trying to do what's best for them to win. So you got to have counters in order to circumvent that. Well, that starts with how you practice. I'll give you an example. There was plenty of times this year, like we feel confident in our man-to-man offense, so we wanted to add. And Coach Mann has always been great. He's like, no, you got to put in zone just in case you play against that team that does that different thing. And there were we went to a 2 or 3 game stretch. Well, all the team did was play zone. That's all they did, play zone the whole time. And they were traditionally man-to-man. They've done it. They scouted it. They were doing different things.
Probably didn't think they could guard you. I mean, right?
I didn't think so. But they also probably said that this is the best way to stop them because they haven't seen this a ton.
Okay, yeah.
So when they did that, our ability to say, hey, I know in the practice plan 3 years ago we did this and 2 years ago we did this, to scrap that and say, hey, you got to have some foresight of what's coming. We need to go ahead and prepare for this just in case. And that's where, again, I go back to the trust level with your players. As coaches, you want to feel like the players know you're confident about what you're talking about.
Right.
In order to do that, what time are you spending with them? But also when you're teaching, how are you teaching the details and how are you preparing them? Because when they see that, they got to feel comfortable enough that they can execute against it, but also feel comfortable enough they can ask you a question that you know the answer to that's going to ultimately help them be the most successful they can be. So your adaptability point that you've said all day is 100% accurate because the ability to adapt gives you another opportunity to raise your level of success in your program. And we strive to do that at Murray State. And that's why, we've had different teams, like, whether it's ball screen team, set-oriented team, a team that played with more freedom on offense, a team that played with more tightness on offense. We've been able to manage all that for the betterment of that team in that particular year.
Right. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it now at LSU. Coach, going back to the ball screen offense, watching some film on you guys, 2 things that stood out. One, the lead guard, when he had the ball, his ability to read not only the guy guarding him, second level, the guy that is hedging or what he's doing, but then the third level, all 10 players, and distributing that ball. But what do you say to the other guys, not the screener, not the ball handler, but the other guys, because they always seem to be, when I was watching, loaded in the right spot, playing off the penetration, just moving to the right angles to get the shot. How do you coach the guys away from the ball screen?
It's simple. Everybody has a job.
Hmm.
You know, when you're on the court, you have a job to do. You know, you don't get to take the day off because, you know, coach always talks about alignment. And he says if you have an aligned car, you're fine. If one wheel is a little bit off, that car is going to tilt. Well, on our offensive end, we teach alignment with everything. So
Love
when a
that.
guy comes off the ball screen, yeah, the guy that's in the position to be the throwback guy, you know, the player lifting up from the corner, he may be open. The big rolling to the rim may be open. The opposite big, what is he doing is important, and the guard is spacing the court. Because if I come off a ball screen, you know, this is just anybody. If I come off a ball screen and the opposite guard who's on the wing is just sitting in the paint, I can't drive. His man is at help. He's just going to
Yep.
steal the ball.
Yep.
So is he spacing the court? The big, what is he doing? Everybody has a job, and everybody's got to be in alignment with that job. And you got to take pride in your job because guess what? There might be one possession that point guard coming off doesn't know the read, and he's banking on somebody else to be where they need to be so he can get the ball to him. You know, one of the things we talk about, you know, again, and this is just going back to Ja in this particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
He averaged 24 and 10, 24 points, 10 assists. He led America in turnovers that year. He was number one in the country in turnovers. Player, and nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
Guess what? He had the freedom to make the reads, but he
Right.
also had the trust that everybody was going to do their particular job at the time. And that's vital to a team. And that's one of the things we're trying to bring to LSU, and that's what we're looking forward to doing. Is it's not about just playing basketball; it's playing basketball with freedom. But accountability is the key for success in any program.
No
If
doubt.
you're accountable, not just for us, if you're accountable to your teammates, that you take pride that if I'm not there, I'm going to take ownership and say it's my bad,
Yep.
and I'm going to get there the next time.
Yep.
And it's important to them to be in that spot. Then you ultimately can have a lot of success. So that was one of the things with our ball screen offense that was really successful because the guards coming off making a read, they had opportunity to go downhill, hit the pocket pass, hit the opposite corner, hit the guy rolling up. They had a lot of opportunity to do different things. And it also led to shot quality, also led to offensive rebounds because if I know where I'm at and I know where I'm supposed to be, when the shot goes up, I know where I need to crash from. It all
Yep.
worked hand in hand. And
Yep.
so, it wasn't, you know, as much freedom we had, it wasn't a lot of randomness because they worked on that
Yeah.
consistently, whether it's
Yep.
individual work, whether it's skill development, they worked on those reads. So when it was a habit at that time, you know, coach, one of his biggest phrase that he said is, you're always going to revert back to the level of your training. You're always going to do it.
Yep.
So if you train that over and over and over, you might miss a shot, but you're going to always, that's going to be your baseline and you can build on. And our ball screen offense has always been predicated on accountability, being where you're supposed to be, and ultimately making the reads to be in the right position.
Yep. I love that, coach. And accountability, no doubt, is one of the core values you need to have in your program if you have a successful one. And I also love what you said about alignment. And you could see that your guys getting to their spots, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to touch on defense because you also are a great defensive team. First of all, Coach, just a random question. When Coach plans practice in kind of the middle of practice or season, what percentage do you think is spent on defense versus offense in a typical practice, or does it just vary a lot?
Good question. We spend a lot of time on defense. I'll probably say
Mm-hmm.
60, 40, 75, 25 on some days.
Okay.
Because even when you're playing 5-on-5, and we do a lot of 5-on-5 and different situational different
Best
things,
teacher of the game is live play. Yep. I like that. Mm-hmm.
100%,
Yep.
100%. But we coach the defense really hard. Not to say we
Mm-hmm.
let the offense off the hook, but we've always coached the defense hard because it translates to any level, any environment, any adversity. If you can guard and you can rebound, it's going to translate. So for us defensively, we take pride in the little things. We don't try to do 1,000 different drills, but what we try to do is be really good at what we're good at. You know, I think people sometimes think shell drill is boring. We do it every day. We
Mm.
don't miss a day on shell drill. We
Yep.
don't miss a
Love
day
it.
with rebounding, and we don't miss a day with transition defense. Those three things are going to be done every day. It might be
Love it.
different facets, but we do that
Yep.
every day
Yep.
because the transition defense piece is going to force communication. If you don't talk, you can't get matched. The shell drill is going to make you trust your teammates. It's going to build your habit to be in the right spot, but it's going to trust your partner out there that he knows where you're going to be at all times. And rebounding, which we do every day, and we do 1,000 different drills for it, is key because you want to have toughness in your program. You got to be able to box and go get the ball,
Dang right.
and you got to be able to do it at all positions.
Yep.
And so we do different variations of those three things every day, but it's always been a staple for us. So again, when we get to the game, you're just reverting back to your habits at this point.
Right.
And even in success, like one of the things coach does, even when we win a game, and our staff, what we've taken pride in, the next day in practice, we still go hard doing the same things. It ain't like, hey man, great game. We're going to
Yeah.
build these habits because you never know when you're going to be at your fatigue level or past your fatigue level that you're going to have to go back to your habits. It was, like as an example, we played against Memphis last year at Murray State, and I
Beat
mean,
them. You beat them.
yeah, and they're a
Yeah.
really
It's a
good
good
team.
win. They're a heck of a team.
But when we played them, we had all of our bigs in foul trouble. We had
Mm.
three bigs in foul trouble. So we had one of our forwards guarding one of their centers who had never played the position. But his positional defense was the same habits he had trained in practice, whether he was guarding that position or not. It was just a habit.
Right.
And so we were able to create opportunities of steals and various different things because of the habits that we formed that everybody trusted they were in their same position. And we go to those three things all the time: transition defense, shell drill, and rebounding. You're going to see that from our team every day you
Every day.
walk into practice.
I love that. I love that, Coach. Just staying with defense. One thing I heard a long time ago, always stuck with me, is when you're deciding how to play defense each year, think about what pisses you off the most, and then try to make sure you can do that and not let the things happen that pisses you off on defense. So, do you guys try to take one thing away, take away their best player? Do you try to, be a team that is great at defending the three, but maybe you give a little more up on the drive, or do you just try to do everything damn good? Is there kind of a core principles of your defense, or is this something you're still kind of working through?
No, we try to guard the three and take away layups. And that's kind of our mantra. I know that's where the game is evolving to, threes and layups. So you got to be able to take those two things away. And we try to build our defense in order to do that. We take pride in one-on-one defense.
Yeah,
You got to be able to guard
guard
your
your
man.
yard.
And I think all of that goes into why I feel like we've had a lot of success as a staff and a program. It's because our players have taken pride and taken that as their identity.
Yep.
But great team defense starts with the individual first.
Yep.
Again, I would love to have the best defense in America, but if I keep driving to the basket, they're going to keep helping. They're going to keep kicking it for three. Well, that ain't great defense. And then
Yeah.
no matter how great your help defense is, that's a problem. So it
Yep.
starts at the point of the defensive guys guarding the ball from our point guard position or anybody that's bringing it up. But then ultimately, again, we try to do a good job of taking away the three.
Mm-hmm.
And different scouting reports require different things. I would love to say, hey, every game plan we're going to go in there and do this, do that. But if a guy has 40, it's asinine for us to just sit there and watch him get 50
Yeah.
and just be like, hey, man, we're going to stick to our principles. So some games require different adjustments.
Right.
Our base really stays the same, but like you said, adaptability is key. We've had a lot of success in postseason plays because we've been able to play multiple styles of play defensively.
Right.
And part of that is what you're teaching, and the other part of that is you got to have guys that can guard the ball in order to do it, so they don't open the floodgates to give up wide open layups and create rotational defense. So no, we take pride in that. Try to guard the three, try to take away layups, but ultimately at the top of the man-to-man defense, you got to be able to guard your yard.
Yep. I love that. And if you're working the transition defense every single day, you can guard your yard and you're taking away threes, you're going to have a hell of a defense. And you guys have, and I'm excited to see you roll it out in the SEC. Coach, one more question, basketball question. Conference tournament play is so special in college basketball, and you can go 3 games. Sometimes I think in your league it was 2 games for the championship because you guys had the top seed. But can you talk us through that? You played these teams multiple times, and you probably know their plays. They know your plays, that type of thing. What is the feeling of conference tournament and then ultimately getting to that championship game and cutting down the conference tournament nets?
Well, when you're playing in leagues, it's win or go home for the NCAA tournament, your urgency rises. So as a coach, I'll speak from a coach point of view first. You want to make sure you're detailed in every game that you've watched of the team you're going to participate in against, because you don't want to have any regrets leaving any stone unturned.
Mm-hmm.
As a player, you know you got to max out because you could be hanging up your basketball shoes at the end of the year.
Right.
So when you get the conference tournament play, it's got to be a different feeling. It's got to be a different level, a heightened level of urgency to do it. And I think the key, one of the major keys you see in those games is composure. Can you keep your composure to be great at what you're great at in the midst of everything that's going on? You know, we
Right.
watched the NBA game last night, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
watched two of them, two game sevens. I felt like when you watch the Boston series, you know, whether you're a fan of the Greek Freak, you know, Tatum, I thought Jason Tatum looked comfortable on the court.
Poised.
Whether he was shooting the ball or creating for others, he looked like he was playing his game.
Mm-hmm.
Greek Freak, who was one of the best players in the NBA, was pressing, and it didn't look like he was comfortable. Maybe not necessarily his fault, but he wasn't comfortable. It wasn't free flowing, and that was the most important game. Luka looked like he was playing at a playground last night.
Right.
Looked like he was playing at a playground.
Yeah.
Again, he was the same player that he was in Game 6, in Game 5. And so now when you have that level of comfortability, when the urgency is at its highest, you're going to enable yourself to allow your team to have success. So I think in the conference tournament game, it's a high level of urgency,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to be able to not only execute your game plan, but you got to be able to stay poised and composed enough to be the player you are. We've had a lot of success in the past because we haven't had players do anything out of character. All
Mm-hmm.
they did was play their game,
Yeah.
and we preached it and we drove it home that your game is good enough to win the game. You don't need to do anything special.
Mm-hmm.
And if special performance happens because of that, that's great. But you can't control foul trouble. You can't control injuries. You can't control any of that.
Right.
So you got to just play your game and let that do the talking for you. And so when you get to conference tournament play, NCAA tournament play, anything like that, the best thing you can do is heighten your level of urgency when you're scouting, heighten your level of urgency studying the details, but you also got to be able to play your game and be composed.
Yeah.
And composed. Because
Yep.
if you go out there and you know, if you're a player that shot 5 times a game, you go out there and shoot 20, your teammates aren't going to know how to react to that. As
Yep.
coaches, we're not going to be able to coach that because it's different. And
Yep.
now you change your style of play from what has been successful just for a specific game.
Right.
And that's hard to be sustainable doing it that way, at least in our opinion.
Yeah. And it's so special when you get to the very end of that conference tournament, I know. And I've seen it even in the high school level, Coach, where all of a sudden you get to the UIL playoffs or whatever state you're in, and a player, like you said, who usually shoots 5 times, ends up shooting 15 times, and it's not the team that got you there. Coach, I know we're out of time. I got the last question I have to ask you because you are in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, now back home in Louisiana, and you have great food. If anyone's traveling through Baton Rouge, do you have a spot where maybe they should stop and eat? Because I know there's so many good ones.
Yeah, so many good ones. I can't give you one on that, but I can tell you this: anything in or around the LSU campus, it's going to be really good. Anything downtown is going to be really good. Anything 30 minutes out, anything within the area is going to be good. So,
okay.
If you come down to Baton Rouge and you stop, you're never going to get a bad meal. So you can trust me on that. You'll be taken care of good and proper.
I believe it, Coach, and I'm so excited to watch your staff now at LSU do your thing. I know you guys will do great things in the SEC. We'll be watching next year, and once again, I look forward to catching up with you soon. But thank you so much for joining our podcast, Coach. We appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. Appreciate the time, and go Tigers.
Love it. Great stuff, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, what a wonderful episode hearing from Coach. So many good things, so many takeaways. I love what he said about shell drill, transition defense, rebounding every day. It'll be exciting to see them do that at LSU. We want to thank our sponsors one more time, Pie Society. We love it here in San Marcos. If you're in San Marcos, stop at Pie Society, get some pizza, get a brew, enjoy the vibe. Zelix Ice House. Great drink specials, great happy hour, great time. We thank them so much for being part of the ride with the Basketball and Brew podcast. I'd like to thank my producer, Jude McLaren, who just graduated from Texas State and is an awesome producer and going to do big things, not just here on the podcast, but an on many other things and many other platforms. And we'd like to thank you for joining us. And next week, we'll be with a great head coach for Texas, from West Texas A&M, Tom Brown. He's a fabulous coach. I knew him when he was at Winona State as assistant coach winning championships. Now he's a head coach, probably one of the more underrated coaches, a Division II head coach who will bring a lot to the podcast next week. Once again, we want to thank our coach, Casey, our guest coach, Casey Long. Excellent podcast. Listen to him. Have a wonderful week, and